All right, so MeritCX used to be Allegiant. It was bought by Merit's Holdings a while back, and they're similar to Qualtrics in that they help businesses send out data or send out surveys to collect data and analyze it. And currently, they have a problem with their ticketing process. So we're going to do an activity. We're going to ask the searcher to come up. Many of you have been given tickets, right? Your previous tickets. And so for this first activity, you just have to wait until what he says matches one word in your search term, and then you can stand up, and he will ask you if you're the solution or not.
Okay, dashboards. Okay, are you the ticket? Okay, are you the ticket? Okay, everybody sit down. Can I read you? Yes. Okay, columns. Nobody has columns. Okay.
It's in there, not at the beginning, sorry.
Okay, are you the ticket?
How can I tell?
I don't know.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Charts.
Wait, there's charts. But I'm not a solution.
Are you the ticket?
I am.
You are the ticket. I found it.
Wow, good job.
Okay. So, anyways.
As you can see, this process of searching through tickets, it was really tedious, and most employees got really frustrated because when we got to MeritCX, the employees were like wasting 2 or 3 hours, spending 2 or 3 hours searching through so many tickets and relying in something that wasn't reliable, which was their memory. Even when they already have a solution, they spend this amount of time and energy searching through the database, and even some of the employees just gave up in the process because they didn't even use the search function that the Jira system already has implemented in. So once we found the solution, we also saw that there would be a potential implementation. One of the implementations that we came up with is already available in the marketplace. And here's my teammates are going to explain the solution later in more detailed information. In the Jira system that we have currently, there is no granular way to find a past ticket. Meaning, if you resolve a ticket, there's not a specific way that you can find through the database. And that's something that creates this bottleneck of searching and many hours spent trying to find a solution that was already in place. So our solution was we can implement more labels of search. So in this case, once we implement these labels of search in place, and we put it in place, we're going to be more detailed and we're going to find our solution quicker. So that whenever a client calls to Merit and the ticket has been already resolved in the past, the Merit employee doesn't have to go through all this amount of tickets, because they're going to be able to find it more quicker and easier in a more granular, in a more detailed way.
So currently, a customer will send in a ticket to Merix, and then if that ticket ends up being some type of bug, it will get sent to the engineering team. The engineering team will notify the Merix team that the bug was solved, and then ultimately that resolution will be communicated to the customer. There are multiple processes in this ticketing system. Everything is centralized into Jira, and it will go to the client-facing team, it will escalate to Tier 1, and then escalate to Tier 2, and if needed, will be sent as a bug ticket to the engineering team. And each tier will write something called steps to reproduce. So on your tickets you saw little titles that explained the basic summary of the problem. And Peter was searching by just that title, and he wasn't, he would say dashboards, and 15 people would stand up because 15 issues had to do with dashboards. So here's the current system overview. There are about 6 teams that can potentially interact with each ticket. So as it goes through each team, they update and they put more information into the ticket. So if you saw the ticket as a tier 1 representative, the ticket might have changed by the time it gets all the way up to the engineering team. So a lot of the words could have changed, a lot of the title could have completely changed based on the problem. And then finally, this is our ERG of the current fields within the ticket. As you can see, it's a pretty flat system. And by that I mean, if you look at the summary of the ticket, sorry it's kind of small, but the summary of the ticket has nothing to do with any of the other fields. So I can search by the summary, but it's not really narrowing it down. Hundreds of tickets will generally pop up if I type the word dashboards into my search. So we came up with a few problems, and with this I really just want to talk specifically about how many tickets come through every day. So every day there are about 20 to 40 tickets that run through the process. And if you can imagine 20 to 40 tickets every day, if you're looking for a ticket that came up 3 months ago that you might have seen one time, it's really hard to find, especially if you can only look at a few words and put those into your search and then 200 tickets pop up. Looking through each one of those tickets is very tedious.
All right, so now we're going to do the second activity to show kind of what our solution will help with. So we'll have the searcher come up again. And this time the tickets will use your components, subcomponents, objects, and malfunction field. And when he says those, it has to match all 3 of them. It can't just match one. It has to continually match all 3 or 4 of them for you to continue standing up. Okay.
So component is dashboards. Nice. Subcomponent is charts. Object is categorization. Okay. What's your malfunction? Everybody, how you did the ticket first? Again. Okay. What's your malfunction?
Cash and please. Hey, bless you.
Cool. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so as you can see, that process was a little bit better at least than the current system. I would say a lot better. And to kind of explain what our recommendation is it's to add a plugin to the Jira system, because the Jira system's pretty well thought out and made, but surprisingly enough, this feature is not in Jira. And so to help you understand a little bit, we want to show you the ERD first. So this is not a complete ERD, this is just certain aspects of it. So this ticket table doesn't have all the attributes it would normally have. We just simplified it so you can see it easier. But you have the ticket table, and the first base categorization you have is component ID, which is linked here. And so the user would select the first component ID, say dashboards, and based on whatever component he chooses, the subcomponents will be populated. So subcomponent is a child of component, meaning that whatever component he chooses, only a limited amount of subcomponents fall under that component. Same thing applies here for objects. Object is a child of subcomponent, and so when they choose a subcomponent, it will limit the amount of objects they can choose. And objects represent a certain part of the program where they're experiencing the problem. So that could be a drop-down or an input field, whatever things it may be. Once they have this, you can take this subquery and search on keywords within this subquery to find more specific problems that the tech support is saying. And so to show you a little bit better, the plugin would look something like this. So this is a Jira page here at Merit CX, and over here you have components. We're recommending building a plugin that adds a subcomponent dropdown as well as an object dropdown. So the user would select the component first. Based on the components, it would populate this subcomponents dropdown. They would choose that, and then the same thing would happen for an object. Another mock-up of this, similar idea. You have components, subcomponents, objects, and then the user can search on keywords using the queries that we explained in the ERD. And this will help users to more efficiently find tickets in the past. And the reason why this is important, I know we said it just to make sure that we're clear, is that they can find solutions in things that have already been worked out. And they can say, okay, we've worked this problem, we know the solution, rather than spending 3 hours to find the solution, they can find it in hopefully 10, 15 minutes. And that will save a lot of time to solve the problem. Is there any questions from anyone about this? Awesome. Okay, thank you. Oh, question?
How long would it take to implement this whole?
Yeah, so as far as specifics on our implementation plan, the first thing we'd recommend is there is a plugin currently that does this. It doesn't have the greatest reviews, and it's not as deep. It's not as deep as you would like this. So our first recommendation is to test that out. There's a free trial, so we test it out for 2 to 3 weeks, and then based on how it goes and if it's meeting the needs of the company, they could make that decision there. If it didn't work out, we were thinking it would probably take about 3 months to implement it. Problem is we're not sure how skilled and like proficient their developers would be in this. So we'd probably recommend outsourcing it and like not outsourcing but hiring someone else who is skilled in Jira development.
Just one comment. Did anybody notice the rule violation in the level 0 diagram? Which is to go from a data store to an entity that has to be processed and complete. Right? Yeah, you can't move data between a data store and an entity without a process to move it in or out of the database. So you have time to fix that before you turn in the project.
Good to know.
All right, thank you guys.
All right, so we did our project on Pressed, which is a flower company. So this is an example of the work that Pressed does. They press flowers to preserve them, to decorate or hang on your wall or whatever. The most common thing that they press is wedding bouquets. So this is an example of a wedding bouquet before it was pressed and then after it was pressed. They also press funeral flowers to preserve, and then they have, which are custom, those two are custom orders, and then they have pre-made arrangements that you can just buy off the shelf. And this is some more examples of the work that they do. They're mainly run off Instagram, and so this is Instagram posts. A little background on Pressed. It's owned by one person, which is Sarah, and she's actually my sister. So the first bouquet that she pressed was mine. That's my bouquet in July. So it was just a few months ago, but since she's had over 100 orders, super successful, and she's always pressing bouquets. She has an office in Provo right now, but she gets people that ship their bouquets in from out of state, presses them, and then ships them back out. So she has a really big vision to expand in different areas. Right now, she only runs off Instagram. So when she first did my bouquet, and it was a success after a lot of fails, she started an Instagram page, and that's where all of her business is right now. And she's very paper oriented, so she keeps everything in a planner, which could be a problem in the future. Although the pressing process she has down to a T, but there's other things that we could work on.
So this is the current system, and essentially in the entire business, there's two systems that comprise her product. And the first is the order placement and processing, and then the second is this process here called the flower pressing system. This has to deal with customer orders and the interactions between that. And the flower pressing system has to do with the way she presses the flowers and what she does to make that happen. We're going to primarily focus on the customer, the order placement and processing system, because it has the most to do with information systems and things that we can help with. So I wanted to go over this activity diagram briefly. And it starts by Sarah receiving a Instagram direct message that basically inquires about her product. She will then reply with whatever information they want in order detail and pricing. The customer will then decide whether they want to order or not. Obviously, if they don't, the system ends. If they do, though, they will need to pay a $100 deposit, which is, she currently runs through Venmo, and they will send in their order information. Upon that, she will reply with instructions on how to drop off their bouquet or their flowers after the event. And then when she does receive the flowers from the customer, she will initiate that flower pressing system, which briefly to go over, it just involves her placing the flowers in the press, setting reminders in her planner to take them out of the press, designing the arrangement, and then actually putting them in a frame. Upon the completion of that process, she'll notify the customer, and they'll coordinate a pickup time, and then they will do the pickup, and the customer will need to complete the rest of the purchase amount through Venmo. So we identified there's 6 main problems with this current system. The first is the limited exposure through using Instagram. Obviously not everyone has an Instagram account, so that isolates a lot of her customers that might have been able to find her through a different method. The second is the communication, which is primarily done through Instagram as well. So there's the first problem that not everyone has Instagram. And then a lot of the communication that she's actually having to type out and send to the customers could be easily communicated through another source, such as a website or some static information. The third is the use of the payment system. Primarily she uses Venmo, and also accepts cash and checks, which these systems are great for like passing money between friends and family and whatnot, but when it comes to a small business, they just don't really hold up. And then fourth is the way she's storing data. She currently uses just an Excel sheet and then also written information in her planner, which obviously you're not going to be able to get the most out of your data using this. She also has a little bit of data that comes from the Venmo receipts or feed that she has, which is very hard to use. It's very limited and doesn't provide her with the best use. Then the fifth is that it's non-scalable, just basically meaning that as her orders increase, she's not going to be able to hold up, communicating with every customer through Instagram. She's not going to be able to accept all these payments through Venmo. So as she increases, it's not going to work out. And then the last is just an overall lack of professionalism with a small business. Her using these tools that aren't necessarily made for a business kind of is not a good thing for the customer. They don't want to see that.
Okay, and then our feasibility analysis, each of the categories are very low risk. Jared will present a little bit later our proposed system, but as far as like if the management approves of it and if it's consistent with the business priorities, it definitely is, especially since Sarah is currently the only employee. And then, is it feasible to make it and build it? Yes, it definitely is. She would hire 4 student developers to implement it, and they'd be able to use technology and systems that they're already familiar with. And because there isn't a current system, it would be compatible with whatever they make. And then the economic analysis, there would be a huge return on investment. The initial cost, she'd be putting in $4,000, and then after taking into account all of the maintenance costs, she would still have a return on investment of about 3,400%.
So the system that we have designed to help solve these problems, it needs to have a good source of information. It needs to have a way for customers to be able to learn about the process, what the company does, what's going to happen to their precious flowers that they have invested so much into for their wedding. And instead of being able to receive that through direct messaging and Instagram, which is not a very reliable option, it needs to have a good source that people can read about that they can have their questions answered. They need to be able to contact the company and be able to inquire about specifics. There needs to be an online ordering system and a way to keep track of orders and records, which comes into the database. We need to be able to keep track of those things. And then we also have designed a kind of a back office solution to help with her pressing process, to make sure that as she scales up to more employees and locations, that she's able to do that without having to worry about, instead of it just being her remembering exactly when she put it in and wrote it in her planner, it'll be digitized and it'll automatically send reminders to the employee in charge that needs to pull those things out of which specific press. Because it's a very time-sensitive process. If you were to open the wrong press, it could ruin these people's flowers. And so, as I mentioned, it does need to be scalable for future growth. This activity diagram that I have here is kind of in reference to the process that Ben went through earlier of the current system. This is that process, but what we will be implementing. And as you can see, Sarah will no longer need to be going back and forth with the customer directly. It'll be just her at the end. They'll be able to do everything through the website, place orders, choose their frame and all the customizations that they need, and be able to leave Sarah to her art and be able to focus on putting out her product rather than communicating with the little details with the customers. So this activity diagram is of kind of that back office solution that I mentioned, where she'll be able to, when she receives the flowers from a customer, she'll be able to scan a QR code that'll have a unique identifier for each press, because she currently has about 15 to 20 of them, and she's constantly getting more as she gets more customers. But as she expands into more locations and hires more employees, each press will need its own unique identifier to use in the database. And so having a QR code will allow the employee or Sarah to scan it, click the name of whose flowers are going in that press so that it records that, and then it'll set an automatic reminder to tell that person or whoever's working that day to pull those out for arrangement on the day that they need, so that the flowers don't get ruined. They'll be arranged, and then they can go into the system and mark that that arrangement is complete, which will automatically notify the customer that they are able to come pick up their flowers or that they've been shipped out to them. This is our context level of our data flow diagram and our use case diagram. We won't get into the nitty-gritty of them, but they kind of help illustrate the process and the system a little bit better. So the design of the system will be, it needs to be an e-commerce website. We're going to use an object-oriented design. As you can see, it would have the database diagram over here, the ERD. And we have a table for each of the things, how they connect through primary and foreign keys to show how the information that's recorded will work together. And then we have a table for site information, because Sarah or her employees, so that she doesn't have to hire like a full-time web developer, she'll have a website with CRUD access that she'll be able to create and change the information that's on the website by putting it into the database, and that's what will be showing on the website rather than hard-coded into the website itself. And then the QR codes, like I mentioned earlier, will provide a unique identifier, which will allow for that scalable growth that we're hoping for, so that she can receive all of that return on investment and that increase in revenue, and she'll never skip a beat as she hires employees or expands to new locations. This is a mock-up of what we thought the landing page might look like. As we continue to design, things will improve and change slightly, but that's our plan. Thank you, guys.
we've got a little treat for you guys. This corresponds to what we're going to talk about.
Breakfast. Just kidding. It's candy. And I guess throw one. You say throw one.
Is it okay if we throw?
Anyone offended? Yeah. Okay, ready? Oh, that's kind of hard. Oh, hard, huh? Okay. I'm trying. There you go. I'll just pass this around.
Okay, so sorry for that. So we did our group project on a company called Blickenstaff, and throughout this presentation, we're going to go through their background, their business case, the current system overview, the analysis of that overview, and then our proposed system. And Kyle's going to get into their background.
Great. All right, I wasn't sure how that was going to go with the candy, but it was a good introduction to what Blickenstaff's is. Blickenstaff's, their goal is to become a neighborhood toy store, just like the good old days. How many of you have a favorite toy? Just by raising hands. I know I do. Hot Wheels and Legos. That was my jam. Blickenstaff's has all kinds of toys and candy and board games. And it was pretty fun to go visit them and interview their staff and their managers. They're a pretty new company. The idea was started back in May 2010 by Jeremy Blickenstaff. And actually the day we went in to interview them, they had their grand opening the following day. So they're a pretty new company, and they're kind of starting to get their feet into this kind of market. And maybe you've heard of them before. They're located down at the shops at Riverwoods here in Provo.
And as we go through this presentation, there are some words that you may need to know. The first being Shopify, which is Blickenstaff's point-of-sale system. Stocky, which is an extension that Shopify can use to track and keep inventory. ShopSync, which could link to MailChimp and Shopify data. And MailChimp being Blickenstaff's SMTP email provider.
So the problem and the opportunity that Blickenstaff is facing that we came in to help them out with is currently they don't have a good online sales platform or functionality to be able to compete with where a lot of consumers are buying their toys and candy for their children, which is some of the big giants like Amazon and Walmart. Another aspect of our analysis is also their inventory management system, as well as their email system. Their inventory management system is pretty manual right now, and so in order to keep up with scaling and growth, we are coming in to implement that. A lot of these things we're building from the ground up, because there's not a lot of existing functionality.
So meeting with Blickenstaff and kind of talking amongst ourselves, we came up with the objectives to create a website that can make online sales so that they can keep up with just locally in Provo some major competitors like Walmart and Target. To create an email list process where they can send emails to their customers, keep track of their information, and to create a new process for tracking inventory so that's not as manual. Some benefits to the business include ability to track inventory, the ability to analyze customer buying patterns, increased revenue from online sales, running email campaigns to bring customers to the store, and then we estimate this project to take about 3 to 4 months.
So this is our feasibility analysis. We talked about economic feasibility, technical feasibility, and organizational feasibility. Just because the fact that this is a brick and mortar store, it's a startup, pretty low budget up front. We put the economic feasibility for this project to be medium, because it's going to cost $14,760-ish on average to get this project done. However, that's going to get paid off in about 50 to 60 days, bringing in $250 to $300 on average per day. So I would pay that off really quick. Technical feasibility. Because no one in Blickenstaff currently has the skills to build this website, they would outsource it to a third-party developer team, such as us or whoever they wanted to hire that has the necessary skills, and they would have everything that they would need the skills to in order to build this the system for them. Organization feasibility is low because the risk of that would be low because the employees and the customers would be using this website every day, and it would increase sales and online recognition for the company.
Currently, their website isn't much more than a few static pages. They have a contact page, an about page, and a home page that has basic information about Blick and Staffs. At the bottom, the footer of the website has links to their social media accounts as well as an option for customers to subscribe to their email list. There's also, if you go on to the next slide, there's a hidden page, the one on the right. If you know it's there, then you can access it if you append the who-we-r at the end of the URL, but there's no link on the home page to that. And that has some positive press remarks as well as some reviews and some more details about who Blick and Staffs is.
And Blick and Staff's current inventory and purchase order process is very basic. When a customer comes into the store, since all their sales are done in store, the employee takes care of them, writes down what they ordered, what the quantity was, puts it on the stack, and then later the manager comes and takes and reads all of that. And then when they need more inventory, the employee walks around the store, determines what products are out of stock or what products are low, and then creates an inventory request form, which is then given to the inventory manager, who then goes and orders more inventory.
This is an activity diagram of their current SMTP, the Simple Mailing Transfer Protocol system that they use through MailChimp. And as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. The customer goes and visits their current website, as Emma talked about, and then basically there's an emailing newsletter that they can sign up for, and eventually that customer's email address makes it to the MailChimp database, where managers of Blick and Staffs can create emailing campaigns and send that out to each of their customers. It's pretty basic in its functionality right now, and it's pretty manual also. And so we'll talk later about how we're hoping to integrate new platforms that will allow that to be more automatic and less work for the managers.
So on their website, there's a couple things that we want to change that we found in our analysis. So first of all, it's this customer experience and design of the website. The hidden page on that website, that's something we want to change. We want to make sure every page that a customer can navigate to is something that's linked so that it's easy for them to access the information that they came to find when they come to the website and the main landing page. Also, the organization and the structure of where the information isn't super intuitive. There's also some links that need to be updated. The Twitter link links to an outdated Twitter that's not consistent with the new brand, and that can cause for some confusion with the customer. Additionally, the biggest thing that we want to implement, like we talked about earlier, is some e-commerce functionality so that customers can come purchase things online and they don't have to visit the brick and mortar store every single time they'd like to make a purchase.
Currently, their in-store purchase orders causes for a lot of human error. It's really easy to be able for an employee to mix things up and to maybe not give all the forms to the manager, and for some orders to get lost. And this could honestly limit Blick and Staff's ability to grow, especially for inventory tracking. If a customer comes in and wants to order a new product and it's out of stock, that's a loss of sales. So some of the improvements that we want to make will integrate through Stocky, which causes a lot of automatic ordering of inventory, a lot of automation, which could remove human error.
And as I mentioned before about their emailing system, one of the big things that we wanted to implement into Blick and Staff's current way of doing business is linking the MailChimp data that they have of customers and emailing campaigns with their Shopify data, which is their point of sale system, and keeping those two systems in sync instead of separate. And the way that we could do that is through, MailChimp has options to add a third-party platform. One example is ShopSync, like we mentioned at the beginning, and implementing that would be pretty simple and allow for a lot of fixes in that.
So on our website, we're proposing that they integrate e-commerce and so that there's that online sale capability. We are suggesting that they outsource any payment processing to a third party, since it's more secure and they currently don't have any technical expertise, and it'll need to be outsourced. It'll be cheaper if they go through a third party. We also are suggesting that they implement an account creation area of their website so that customers can come purchase gift baskets or products that they purchased before, and that they can get some customer information and send out mailing lists and product recommendations. Another feature we'd like to see implemented is a gift basket creation where customers can select different products to put in a gift basket and have that shipped. They also have several collaborations with local businesses such as Pepper Kids Company, and so those events and collaborations would be featured on the website. Here are some mock-ups of the proposed UX UI feel for the new website. The top left is the landing page, and then it walks you through the gift basket creation process and the checkout process.
Okay, so this is the data flow diagram that we want to implement. Currently, they don't have any of this in process. However, we would create a website that would connect to Shopify and in turn, as well as Stocky, and this would all be happening on the back end. And all the user data for the order would be processed through Shopify, which would be stored in their data store, and their customer information and email, all that information would be sent to the MailChimp, would be stored in that database, and what they ordered and how much they ordered and the resulting inventory that is left, a report of that would be stored in Stocky's inventory, which would be, all of that information would be generated into a sales summary, which would be sent to the manager of Blake & Staff so that they can track their inventory, make sure everything's processing, and be able to order inventory automatically, as well as see inventory that is selling faster than others and make smart recommendations for that.
And a quick explosion of what Stocky can do on how it orders more inventory is at first you can create a low inventory report based on the orders and purchases by the customers. That report can be sent to a purchase order, which would then go directly to the vendor, so that Blake & Staff doesn't even have to manually order more inventory. And that inventory depletion data can also go to the managers that can create sale item suggestions based on items that aren't selling.
And finally, continuing with our proposed new system, with their emailing system, it's a bit more complicated what we're proposing, but with, as I mentioned, a third party implemented into their MailChimp and Shopify systems, that they could get a lot more done with a lot less work as far as from a manager standpoint goes. And the big thing here is eliminating all the manual input and the potential for out of sync data between customers and sales that they sell online.
Awesome. So now that we've talked about toys and candy and flowers, we're going to talk about janitors. And our presentation, we're just going to give a very brief overview. We're not going to go super into detail just because there's a lot of ins and outs of the janitorial system. So we're going to start with background. We can do some business case, system overview, basically do a normal analysis.
So just to give a little bit of background to Absolute Janitorial Services, started in 2007, and they're headquartered here in Orem, or sorry, not here, but in Orem. And they have a lot of remote buildings that they cleaned. They're a veteran-owned company, and so through that, they've been able to contract a lot of government buildings with the federal government and the state government, and also Montana and Wyoming. They have about 60 employees on average. Most of them speak Spanish, and most of them work here as their second job, usually late at night or early in the morning. And they have a pretty high turnover because of the nature of the work. They usually have to hire 3, on average, sometimes more employees each month. And because a lot of their employees work remote, it's sometimes hard to talk and communicate with us. Here's kind of a brief organizational structure to how the company's set up. The upper management consists of Lisa, Jasmine, Bob, and Stan, who are the main 4 who kind of run the company. And then they have 4 janitorial supervisors who are kind of the in-betweens between upper management and the janitors.
There are a few problems with the HR system in general. There's not a centralized database where all of the employee information is stored, and everything is done on paper, which makes it really difficult to get from the janitor up to the upper management. And then because this is a second job for most janitors, there's a high turnover, but they need to get a body in the building as soon as they can to keep their clients happy. And so getting the information from those quick hires is really difficult, especially when it's done on paper. And then these are the required documents because there's like a W-4, I-9, and because they work at a lot of government buildings, there's like background checks and things like that.
So as we said, they pretty much do all of their processes on paper at this point. So we can't quite overhaul everything, but as far as our scope goes, we want to kind of expedite their process of onboarding. So we want to be able to obtain their required documents for hiring a new employee quicker. We also want upper management to be able to communicate more efficiently between each other when it comes to the onboarding process. Right now, they're all just kind of in like a group text, and whenever an issue comes up, they'll like throw it in, but sometimes it gets lost in the massive text that happens. And then we also just want a centralized HR system where all of these documents can go so that they can all be accessed by upper management. So we ran our feasibility analysis. Organizationally, it's just definitely a need. It's something that they definitely can do. They're doing it now, just very inefficiently, like I said, through text message, through paper, in manila folder, stuff like that. Technically, they're not a software company at all. They don't have anyone who can build the system, so they're definitely either going to have to hire out a software engineer or a team of software engineers, or they're going to have to buy an existing solution. Economically, they do have, as we said, they have lots of government contracts already signed. They have a lot of cash stores and things like that. At this point, they are just going to be able to take the time that's spent during the onboarding process and turn that into an ROI after paying either a software engineer or for software, and be able to get around 70 to 80%.
So briefly, this is how the activities of the company should look, ideally. So the employee fills out an application, the HR director looks at the application, interviews the applicant, decides if they want to hire them, they inform the supervisor, and the supervisor, who has direct contact with the applicants, gives them the hiring packets. They fill out the paperwork, and then it gets back to payroll, and everything's happy. However, that's not usually what happens. Usually, this is how it ends up being. You can see there's a lot of inefficiencies because of the back and forth of the swim lines of the swim lanes. So usually what happens is the applicant fails to fill out the paperwork, and so when payroll time comes around, the payroll director is left without any information, so the employee can't be paid, and that doesn't make anyone happy. So they have to contact the HR director, who contacts the supervisor, who contacts the employee, who fills out the paperwork, and then it goes back to the supervisor and the director. So it's just very inefficient. And this whole time they're in a group message texting this important data. Sometimes they'll say like, hey, I just need a social security number. So they'll like send a social security number over text message, which is not a good idea.
So after talking with the upper management, they were very clear about what the new requirements are going to need to be for their new system. One, the biggest one for sure is they need some sort of centralized database to store all these documents. Because they're all tax related, like social security numbers, I-9s, they're very sensitive, and it's not really the best idea just to be keeping them in manila folders for the company. They need some place to store the documents, and then what they really need is some place to access those documents so they don't have to pass the physical copies back and forth.
So we decided to design just a general database, and
they need. So we'll have an employee table that has like their information, their hire date, their social security number. And then we'll see which documents they have and have a linking table between the documents and the employee. And then also what locations they're working at and a linking table between those as well.
So kind of with all of this in mind, and as we took into account the needs of absolute janitorial and kind of the timing that needs to go into this, it needs to be overhauled pretty much immediately. So building a solution specifically for them could take a couple months. So we believe it is in their best interest to just buy an existing solution, and there are many HR solutions out there already.
After kind of reviewing various HR softwares that are out there, kind of third-party softwares that they can buy, we found that GoCo is the one that meets their system requirements the best. Some of the benefits of GoCo is one, it has that centralized database, which has data access as well. So upper management can get on, click on an employee and see what documents have been filled out from within the database. It also makes sending out those the documents for onboarding a lot faster because they can just do it through email instead of printing off copies and sending them to them. And it has other add-ins like PTO accrual and also payroll synchronization.
When we were trying to figure out our ROI, we determined that they're losing about $7,200 a year because of the time that it takes to try and gather that information. And GoCo without any add-ins, which will do what they want it to do, is $4,080. And so the gain and the investment gives us an ROI of 76%.
So this is what the data flow looked like before. You can see that each of the process boxes at the bottom is the HR director formatting information for the upper management, for the payroll department, and for the Utah Workforce Services, which is a requirement for stuff, I guess. And so you can see it's like super inefficient because each process, the HR director is formatting new information. However, with the addition of GoCo, there's a centralized database over here that the external entities are able to simply gather the reports from. So it makes it a lot easier for the upper management and the payroll department to gather the information they need. Obviously, because we don't want to give access to Utah Workforce Services, the HR director would still have to compile the reports for them. But overall, it's a lot more efficient with that centralized database. So the data flows smoothly.
These are just kind of some screen grabs from GoCo software. We signed up for like a free trial with kind of a fake company just to see how it works. And so the two things that I circled are the documents page and the onboarding tasks page. Documents. So here they already have all the government forms that are needed for when you're hiring anybody to any kind of company. Below that they have the agreements, kind of just like specific company things that Absolute Janitorial would have their new hires sign as they're getting into things, and then they have just an option to come up with documents that need to be collected. So there no longer needs to be text messages to do we have this, do we have that. You just all add in here. And this is the onboarding task page. So the HR director just has to build this once. They can build all the tasks that they need while they're hiring someone new, and anyone who has access can come in and access and see how far along an employee is on the process.
So obviously, Absolute Janitorial is in desperate need of a complete overhaul of their HR system, both for security and for efficiency. And based on our research, we think that GoCo is the right option, and we're excited to help them implement it if they pay us.
Summerfield Retirement Center for our project. A little bit of background about Summerfield is it's a fairly new establishment. It was founded in 1999 by Rebecca Landau. The main focus that she wanted to, the main direction she wanted to take Summerfield was to make sure it was family oriented and that everyone knew it was locally owned, because she'd worked with a lot of retirement centers in the past that were more like, that felt like more like corporations, and she wanted to make sure that everyone who brought their loved one to be in Summerfield felt like they really cared about their residents and they were focused on getting the best care for them. Here's the organizational structure that they have. It's really flat, so you have Rebecca Landau as the owner. She delegates pretty much everything to Daniel Owens. And then these are all of their department managers. The most important one to remember from this slide is Roger Blomquist. There's a reason he's in red. He is a dietary manager. He is in charge of all the kitchen staff and making sure that they have enough food in their pantry and in their fridges so that they can feed their residents on a day-to-day basis. So here's the issue with what I just said about Roger Blomquist is he doesn't have anything physical. He has no way of keeping track of the inventory that they have on hand at all. It's all in his head, which is a problem. He's been with the company basically since they were founded, so he's got a lot of experience, and he's got they've given him a lot of slack because he's been with them for so long. Basically, there's two kind of main things, and the food spoilers kind of goes into the spending too much. They estimate, Rebecca and Daniel, when we talk to them, they estimate they're spending a couple thousands more than they should on food per month, simply because there's no way to track how much is actually being used, how much they need to throw out, how much they actually need to order, rather than and they think they're ordering too much. A little side thing is they kind of suspect that Roger's running a catering business out of their kitchen, which is not good. They can't prove anything because there's no records. But so feasibility for going forward and creating an inventory management system, which is what we wanted to do. Economic risk is low because, like I said, they estimate that they're spending thousands more than they should, and a system that would take care of their inventory would cost hundreds to implement rather than the thousands, and then it would be a lot better for them in the months to follow. So the risk would be low for the economic. For technical risk is medium. It's higher than the other ones because there's no technical staff in the retirement center. So they would need to buy an existing solution, which wouldn't take a lot of technical expertise. But for upkeep, or if anything ever breaks in the system, like they will have no way of fixing that themselves. They'll have to bring in someone else. So that's why it's medium. And the organizational risk is low because they're very motivated to change things. They don't like how it's working. They think they're spending too much, and the big wigs, the owner and the executive director, are the ones who came to us and said, "Here are our problems. We want to change them."
Perfect. So, as a retirement home, they have a lot of medical systems in place to make sure that everybody there gets their meds on time and stuff like that. But we decided to focus on the food ordering system because of the lack of transparency and functionality in their current one. Basically, really simply, the way that it works right now is that the food ordering system is the dietary manager, basically. And so he'll distribute these blank meal cards giving all of the options for the weekly meals to all of the residents. The residents fill out the cards showing what they want for each meal throughout the week, and then he places an order based on those, and then from there the vendor returns the inventory, or the report of the inventory that we're getting back. So exploded a bit more,
Like I said, it starts out with the meal cards, and then the individual meals are counted off of those meal cards and stored on a meal report, which is just a piece of paper that they don't keep long-term, just for immediate use. From there, they determine the ingredient counts that are needed, and the dietary manager determines the order by looking at the current inventory that they already have and comparing that to what they need. They send off the order information to the vendor, receive an invoice, and once they get all of the inventory from the vendor, the dietary manager confirms that they've received everything that they ordered, and they store the new inventory, and then the kitchen staff prepares the meals.
So as the current system sits right now, there's several problems, and we had the opportunity to meet with Summerfield and tour their facility and how they store their inventory. Honestly, they're, like Dallin had mentioned, there's absolutely no organization. So they took us to all their different storage locations, and they said, we don't know how long some of this food's been here, like we don't know. They recently had this prompt as upper level management to kind of involve themselves more in this food ordering system. So they went down and they looked around and they found expired stuff. They found stuff people didn't even know existed. So it was really an awakening moment, and prompt to our project, we were able to talk to them and come up with some ideas and some solutions. So the biggest thing is that ordering is being performed by one individual. There's no checks, there's no processes, there's no approval process of the order. He just has a feel for what they need based on these meal cards that they send out to the residents, and he makes the order. And then the food comes in, and no one else is involved except for himself. There's no real-time inventory management, so they can't look and say, we have 10 jars of applesauce. They just have an amount of applesauce in a certain location that no one besides the dietary manager could tell you where the applesauce was. He's the only one that's really controlling the system. There's no storage of records. As Chris mentioned, the only data store is this meal count, so they tally up all the meals for the week. But after that, and after they use that, it's thrown in the garbage. So data is, like we've mentioned, it's all in the dietary manager's head. There's no prediction-based modeling, so if they were to implement a system, they could predict, in theory, how much they need at a certain time of the year based on how many residents they have, based on these meal choices, and it'd make ordering, it would basically place the order for them. And then the biggest thing that was the biggest concern of management is the potential theft. They had talked to their vendor, and their vendor said, seems like you guys are ordering way too much food, and they suggested to them that there was a lot of theft coming out of their kitchen, and so this really promoted them to make a change, because even if there was theft, there was really no tangible evidence for them to prove it because there are no records kept. So the incentive to really change their system to be able to minimize theft, and if there is theft, to be able to have proof that, hey, this food came in, we never cooked with it, where is it, you know? So going into that, our new system proposal, we have the why and the how. So the why is to reduce spoilage, minimize overspending, minimize theft, and the how is basically to create this centralized database for all of these different moving parts of the ordering system, and this would save thousands of dollars a month for the company. The first part that's important is being able to take initial stock. So before any of this could happen, they obviously have a large amount of existing inventory, and they need to go through and take inventory of all the items they have. So they have static ware, since they are like a residence home, they have plates and cups and forks, and they have to order that occasionally. They have dry storage, they have refrigerated, they have freezer. They even have leftovers, and there's certain rules. Like most restaurants don't serve leftovers, but a retirement home can. And there's certain health regulations on how soon you have to serve these leftovers. This would all be incorporated into this initial inventory taking.
Perfect. So after the initial inventory is taken, it's imperative that the inventory stays up to date. So we decided on 6 steps that they should take to make sure that all future deliveries are recorded correctly and their system stays up to date. So first step would be to review the current inventory and meal counts, and then to place an order for everything that they need. And then once the order is delivered, the staff will barcode each of the items and scan it into the system. And then after that, they'll store it in its proper place.
So while the dietary manager might have been doing some shady stuff, he actually had a good idea and he is taking the meal cards and predicting how much they're gonna need. When we asked Rebecca about their menus for the week, she said that they're on a 6-week rotation, so they have every 6 weeks the exact same menu will come back around. And if they store it like this and they keep track of meticulous records about, you know, how much inventory they've been using each week, they can have a guesstimate on how much they should be spending, and then they can judge how much they actually ordered versus that estimate and see if they're around where they should be or not. And being able to predict like that will definitely help them to budget and spend less than they want to, which was their overall goal in the first place.
Yeah, and so since we've talked to them, their vendor actually has a barcode system. While it doesn't embody all of the changes we suggest for them to implement, it does help a lot with their inventory. So since we have spoken with them, they have taken an overall inventory and they have implemented this barcode scanning system that's offered by their vendor to keep track of their inventory. So they have made progress while we do suggest other things, and they could do some predictive analysis and use this meal card because it does rotate. That could all be fed into a database as well. But overall, they have made a lot of positive changes and are happy to have helped them discover those changes.
Jump up and go do something, you can. We'll just, we usually start 5 to 7 minutes late anyway, so given and taken.
You will be so offended if you get up and leave. Okay.
All right, good morning. We're going to be talking about Flex Trim. We're really excited. We've been working with this company. And anyways, we're really excited to show you what we got. Just by way of introduction, I'm Evan Cannell.
I'm Carly Gales. I'm Lindsay Simpson.
Jeremy Gales. In this presentation, we're going to go over sort of an overview of the problem faced by Flex Trim, what Flex Trim is, and then we'll talk about the system they're currently using and our new proposed system. So first off, Flex Trim is a Provo family-owned business. They make synthetic wood products, so it looks like wood. It can be painted and stained just like wood, but it's flexible. So it can be bent around a round corner. It's often used for crown molding on archways. They actually do a lot of work in the temples. So right up here, this? There we go. So right up there, that's probably fake wood, and it was probably made by Flex Trim because it's flexible, so they can bend it over the archway. Matt Anderson is our contact over there, and he was really excited to see how technology could specifically help him with his manufacturing process. There's a lot of mistakes that get made in there. We're going to use some words mold and cast a lot during this presentation. The basic manufacturing process is there's molds, and there's a polyurethane product that's poured inside the mold that will then set up and make this synthetic product.
Yeah, so like Evan said, the main problem faced by management is in regards to manufacturing. They don't track casts and molds very clearly, and it's important because they have thousands of molds in their facility that they have to store there, and so it can get hectic, they can lose molds, they can spend a lot of time looking for them. It's also important that they don't overuse molds. If you overuse one, then your casts will have flaws and they'll be hard to sell. And then also they don't track the casts very well through the production process, which slows things down. So our proposed system will have three main objectives. First, to reduce wasted materials by reducing duplicated casts. Second, to improve production speed by tracking the casts through the process. They won't be lost and there won't be miscommunications. And third, to minimize misplacement of molds. They won't have to rebuild a mold if they lose it.
Okay, so this is a very brief overview of the current system right now. But here is our activity diagram. It's really small, really long. But basically what's happening, I won't talk about everything, but what's happening is after a customer makes a request, customer service prints out a paper work order that the mold manager will use to gather the molds that have to be used to complete the order, and then the mold manager will put those molds on the pending job area. Then the cast technician will go to that pending job area, look at the work order, take the molds, put them wherever there's space in the room, and we'll start working on the order. And the way they do that is they will put a dot on the paper to say that the material is ready to be poured in the mold. And then once it's been poured, they'll change the dot into a tally. If there wasn't a dot before, they'll just put a tally anyway. So like you can probably see that there's already a lot of space for human error. And then once the cast is ready and can be taken out of the mold, a label is being put on the cast. Here is our context level diagram, and the main thing that we've realized through the variable diagrams that we've made for this project is that the way that information and data is being passed is mostly through paper rather than more digitalized way. And then here's the ERU that they're using, and because all of this massive data is being stored in Excel workbook in separated Excel sheets, there isn't any relationship between the columns. There isn't any primary key, foreign key, whatever. So it's kind of
Perfect. So as you can imagine, this what Lindsay just talked about causes a lot of cascading errors. So first, mold location and miscommunication with mold location information. There's tens of thousands of molds at FlexTrim. They're all stored in an Excel spreadsheet. Just running a lookup on that spreadsheet can take up to 10 minutes. So there's a lot of people being paid just to wait around for Excel. As well, inside that spreadsheet, only the general location of the molds are stored. And so then they gotta go to this general location and search around for it. So they're getting paid once again to go on these wild goose chases every single day and look for molds. There's a lot of time, a lot of money being wasted there. Lack of task completion verification. It's hard to know where a certain part is on the process. There's a lot of they rely completely on word of mouth to know what step of the production process each cast is in. And then these last 5 here, mold tearing, pouring too many parts, wasted time with labeling errors. Long parts have got to be spliced, and it's hard to know how long is the part right now. And then lost work orders. All of that can be attributed to the fact that it's all being kept on pen and paper work orders. People make tally marks, they forget all the time, and then the work order will pass hands, and the new employee has no idea, like, if it's up to date as far as the tally count, so they'll make too many parts all the time. These parts are expensive to store. It's unclear whether they can actually ever sell them, so they're just constantly wasting material, cranking out way too many parts.
So, our new system proposal to combat all of these issues with data storage and data communication is a database and a mobile app that Flextrim will implement in order to store all of this information and to manipulate and work with all this information. So essentially, what we are proposing is the database would contain all the information on mold usage and cast usage. So when an employee is working with a mold, they'll scan a barcode and track that it's being used. That way, if anybody else is trying to use that mold, or if the mold is old, then they can keep track of where it is and communicate that information, as well as how old it is, so that when it is too old, they can throw it out and be prepared if there are any issues with the mold. So this is our activity diagram. Again, we won't go through it because the processes are pretty long with this project. However, essentially what will happen is the application will, the casting technician will log into the mobile application. They will choose a work order from the list of work orders for that day, and then from there they can scan the barcode for the mold they're using. They'll record all the information for the mold as well as their cast, and then they'll be able to track all of that information as well as inventory, so that there are no issues with that in the future. This is our context level diagram. Again, this is the data that's being passed through. So we've got the software logging data, the work order data. We're working with the customer service team, the executives, the casting technicians, the customer. This is our entity relationship diagram. So as you can see, the current system's ERD is not connected in any way because everything's separate and inefficient. This ERD is connecting all of the tables, and so it's a lot more efficient to collect data and to know who we're working with and what we're working with and how everything interfaces. And finally, our use case diagram involves the casting technician, the executives, customer service, our finishing department, and the mold managers. So essentially, our casting technicians will be able to make notes in the application about specific work orders and what they're doing, so that information all gets communicated. Our executives can also make notes in the application for special work orders that need special notes. We also have the ability to check order statuses, update statuses, print labels, things like that. The finishing department can then check the mold locations and the order statuses, so that when everything is finished, all of that information is being recorded.
And then for the feasibility analysis of the proposed solution, it has medium technical risk. They don't have the in-house ability to build it, obviously, so we've suggested that they outsource it. The economic feasibility has a medium risk. It's important to note that we have a return on investment of 249% over 5 years, so it will benefit them. And then there is a low organizational risk because management has been asking for this. They're totally on board, and it wouldn't be hard for employees to implement. So our proposed system for Flextrim would be able to be implemented, and it would be beneficial for them as well.
Any questions?
Thank you so much.